So our next session is the threats and opportunities for wealth management advice firms. Quite a wide-ranging discussion ahead. Rising costs, artificial intelligence, preparing for the great wealth transfer between the generations. But you're in very capable hands with the panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, I'm Fiona Oliver. I'm the Managing Partner of Partners Wealth Management.
Hi, I'm Alex Spreckley, Managing Director at Saltus Financial Planning.
And good afternoon, everyone. Ben Covey, Managing Director of a team of advisors at Seven Investment Management.
All good so far. Right, so let's start with costs, because I think there's a lot to contend with for advice firms. You've got compliance costs have gone up, the research costs, new technology, and even the cost of attracting talent. So, I mean, Alex, I'll come to you first. How is your firm approaching this, and how can advisors kind of find a balance or a way of prioritising within that?
So I just need to check. Any hands up, anyone who is a financial advisor in the room here? Oh, I can't get away with it, unfortunately. Yeah, actually someone asked me this morning, what's the themes for today? And I said, well, it's kind of threats, opportunities, and costs. And I think we've all been discussing costs for the last 2 decades, so it never goes away. I look at it from the opportunity first, I think, really, if that's okay. So I think the opportunity is that we can do more to pass on the benefits of vertical integration, if that's how your firm works, or from the way we provide and use technology to serve our clients in actually reducing costs for clients. And that's one of the key things that we're really determined to do. So there's an opportunity there over the next period to really do what we've been saying we want to do for many, many years. So for me, there's an opportunity there.
Fiona?
Yeah, I think it's about fair value. And if you think of the client experience, it's not so much about what's the cost of the advice. It's perhaps more about, where do I see that value? How significant is that to me? And I kind of think if you look at the whole financial advice chain, it's probably whoever is the closest to the client is the one that will be able to command more of the value chain than less. So I think it will affect all of us in that chain slightly differently, but I think it's where the client perceives the value to lie is probably the thing to focus on. I think as an overall group, we've got to try and drive costs down for the benefit of clients, and I think we are all very mindful of that. But being fair to clients, there being sort of fair value, and then this idea of, I think it's the, who sits closest to the client will probably be the one who will do best in that.
I mean, you said a moment ago that we've seen the fee pressure for the last at least 2 decades. I mean, surely there can only be so far that we can force fees down before advisors are working for free.
I don't. I mean, I'm not sure that I've seen fees drop really. They're pretty static, 1.5 broadly. Anything more than 2 is a bit toppy. But broadly, it's where they've been for many years. So my view is that you can get a lot lower. But obviously, it's come back to Fiona's point about value and actually what's the client getting for it and how are we paying for it. So there's a lot more kind of passive, non-reactive, kind of basic services that can be lower than that. But for the broad wealth management service, you are looking at 1.5%. But I think we can get that down, and we should get that down, because if we're not, we're kind of failing to get the efficiency within our business and the productivity to then pass on and still make a profit, because we're a business. So that's really important. We shouldn't be afraid of saying, look, we need to make a profit, but equally we need to reduce the fees by reinvesting.
I'll just jump in, if I may, a little bit on that. I'm just looking around the room to see if our representative from the FCA is still here. Because, the FCA encouraged our industry to unbundle fees, which is actually really important. It's important that clients know what they are getting for that 1.5% or that 2%. And in that unbundling, I think what we've managed to achieve is clearer pricing for each component part of the journey, be that the platform fee, be that in the investment management fees, or be that the wealth management advice, the financial planning advice. And actually what I've seen over probably a couple of decades is a shift. The investment management fee compression, absolutely. More clients moving to passive. They want, it's becoming more commoditized. Meanwhile, the financial planning, the value of an advisor can create for their client, the value of that's getting more and more important as we see successive governments make it more complicated, increase taxes, surprise budgets, then you kind of trying to anticipate what's going to happen to your pension. That financial planning advice is so important. So as long as I think advisors are creating value, then you can justify the overall fee, and it's the composition of that fee that's evolved over time.
And I mean, how do you balance rising costs within that, though? I mean, Alex, you mentioned that fees have been pretty static for a while, but we know that there's actually a lot more pressure on business now.
Yeah, so I say 1.5%, but it actually pre-RDR, so go back pre-2012, and the unbundling is actually most of the explicit charges were not put for the financial planner. So back then it would have been 1.5% made up of majority of investment management and platform. And today at Saltus we charge 1% for our financial planning, and 25 for a broad average client, 1% for financial planning, and back then, 2010, before that, if I'd have said to the financial planners in my team, you're going to charge 1% financial planning, they would have all left the next day, and it would have been impossible to communicate that to a client. But now clients accept it because that's where the value has come back to Fiona's point.
Excellent. So I think a threat, a challenge, an opportunity across not just this industry, but all industries is AI, which we've spoken about already today. Ben, how are you approaching AI and harnessing it?
Yeah, I was thinking about how to address this, and I now know we've got one advisor in the room, so I need to be slightly careful. But in the main, and I can speak having been an advisor myself and worked with advisors for 25 years, in the main, advisors are not early adopters of tech. They're not naturally the first movers when you see this new technology. So what's quite interesting is advisors are slightly reluctant when we're now saying, look, AI is brilliant and it can help us do certain things. It is brilliant and it will help us do certain things. So specifically in 7IM, this is in the public domain, we're working very closely with an AI company called Aveni. We put a press release out about 18 months ago about the work we're doing with them. It can do so much more than what we're using it for. We're just using it at the moment to capture client conversations, translate that into a useful meeting note, and maybe push that onto our CRM system. That's pretty entry-level AI, but at the moment, you can only move as fast as your advisors can embrace it, I think. I think it will have a lot more, but at the moment, that's what we're doing, and that will help productivity.
Yeah, I mean, much like Ben, I think advisors, again, I've been an advisor that we sometimes don't want to embrace change. But if you look at it from the client's perspective, one of my team said to me yesterday was, if he's there with a client, instead of writing down all the notes the client's giving him, he's listening to the conversation. He's actively listening than sitting with his pen and scribbling down what the client's saying. And I think some of the benefits of AI, that's a byproduct, isn't it? But actually it's quite a rich byproduct where you're getting better client conversations because you're not, none of us are that good at doing two things at the same time, I don't think. The other thing I think is that if you look at client service, surely it improves with AI because some of the tasks will actually be quicker to execute. So if you're waiting for a meeting report or an annual review summary document, all of that should arrive quicker if we've used AI. So I think clients as well, we found Partners Wealth, our clients are often professionals, so that's our backdrop, that's our sort of client base, tend to be professional people, often city-based, often busy execs. And those people are, when the advisor said, well, how will I tell my clients I need to record the meeting? We found all those clients are going, oh yeah, we've got one of those as well. We're using that, we're lawyers, we're using that to, record our client conversations. So I think they're almost expecting us to bring tech that they're seeing. So I think it's actually been quite straightforward to propose, get the advisors to adopt in obviously their varying degrees and time frames, and actually the clients I think will benefit. So that's really good from my point of view.
So we've been sitting and watching, I think, for some time, and I say that from a board level to make sure that we're creating a strategy. And the challenge that we've had is very hard to create a strategy when it's moving so quickly. There's so many horses in the race, and so we've kind of, I wouldn't say we were caught out because we're not caught out, but we're just waiting to work out which part of the value chain that we add AI. And in the last 6 months, we're now working with 4 different providers through different places from compliance, which is quite really interesting actually, right at the front and the back. So we also have it in the investment team as well, and so it is quite difficult at the moment. In fact, I had a chat just this morning with our kind of CIO to say, look, how are we going to communicate this strategy that we have as a business? Because 4 AIs from, how we're going to integrate them, And it's not just a case of switching them on, plug and play. That doesn't work. You've got to train advisors. You've got to kind of adopt into systems. You've got to make sure the data's good, because if the data's not very good, you're going to get crap out, as it were. And so for us, it's just making sure that we've got the right strategy and approach. But it is already making a big difference. And this other horse has come up even in the last 2 weeks, is that Copilot. So we've got these kind of enhanced licenses that firms can get. So it's already plugged into SharePoint and most of the systems and CRM and Outlook. And so actually the enhanced one, which is £100 a month just as an upgrade, that's almost doing as much as the other firms. Well, I won't mention their names. So it's actually quite a really interesting time to work out where to kind of invest your time and money, I think. That's a challenge that we found.
But that seems to be how advisors are using it. Do you see a world where you can use AI to provide sort of a very base level advice service for, lower wealth clients?
So I think AI has its place. I think it suffers from a lack of trust. I mean, I don't necessarily trust it, and it actually says to you on the bottom, whenever you do anything, don't trust this, So, so I think, clearly, if you want to go to ChatGPT and say, look, I've got £10,000 to pay into something, what should I do? And and the more you feed it, the better it is. It will come out with a very good recommendation. So you can go and do it.
Yeah, and I share your view that I think that whilst AI is still sort of quite new to a lot of consumers, if you look at the people that will probably adopt it quicker, it'll be the youngsters. And they actually aren't distrusting. I've got an example of 2 teenagers, both doing A-levels a year apart. One is submitting, before he does his A-levels, he is submitting his practice papers to his teachers, and they are sending them back 2 days later to mark. The year behind, so just this year, the other child is doing his A-levels. He didn't use the teachers at all to mark any of his papers, which did worry me. And he sent them all to AI, and he kept saying, I've got 85% at the dinner table. And I kept thinking, I wonder if AI works or not. And we'll only find out when the results come. Fortunately, it worked fine. But to that point, that's an 18-year-old who is thinking, well, I don't need to ask the teacher, I'll just ask AI. So I think they will really quickly embrace it. And my view is that whilst it might not be perfect, particularly at a lower level, what's the important thing actually is people save. So if people are investing in a simple manner, and AI is broadly saying, if you've got 10 grand, you should do this. First think about your rainy day fund. That should be in something like this. I kind of think it's a real positive that it brings advice to the mass market that is something we so clearly need.
Well, it just reminds me of a conversation I had with someone the other day. I think we've got a panel here of digital tourists. We're not digital natives. And, you're referring there to the teenagers. I likewise have teenage children who are using ChatGPT all the time. It staggers me. That's their go-to. They don't use Google anymore. They use ChatGPT. So I think we will start to see a shift as some of that generation come into the workforce as advisors. But at the moment, the average age of an advisor in the UK is late 40s, early 50s, and so the penetration of this technology is still light.
So if that's the opportunity, so ChatGPT can tell you where to put 10 grand, is the challenge then, how do you get someone to understand when their needs have got more complex and they need to start trusting someone who is not an algorithm for their advice? You can't just nod.
Yeah, I think it is. But I think there's always that difficulty, isn't it? When clients are transactional and, we mostly have long-term relationships, but occasionally we'll have a transactional client who says, thanks very much. I just want you to lift the lid off everything, give it a good old dust down, and then, I'll come back in a few years. The problem with that is often events have happened. They don't know they needed advice while the events were taking place. And that's always the question I would frame back to a client is, how will you know when you need advice? And often the opportunity's passed, hasn't it? We recently saw someone with a significant amount of wealth, over 10 million, who hadn't got an ISA. That they've been acquiring this wealth over the 20 years, and you think to yourself, intelligent person, it's amazing what people sometimes omit to do. So I think it's a really difficult balance, and I think if people are the youngsters come forward, start to invest slowly, in some kind of algorithm, possibly the truth is, why would they change that? Why would they then come to seek advice? Because they think they can do it themselves, But in a way, I still go back to, it's better that people are served in a non-risky, mass affluent manner than they're not served.
So I don't. It's neither an opportunity or threat, but I kind of, it dawned on me when I was having a meeting with one of these providers a few weeks back that there's this kind of almost this battlefield on the kind of the West. You've got the practice management suites that have been existed for many years that are kind of trying to adopt AI and digitally kind of engage. And on the right-hand side, you've got these kind of disruptors, these AI companies, and they're all trying to win the middle ground, because these are kind of developing all the reconciliation tools that these guys have, and these are trying to create all the AI. And so it's a really interesting space to see who's going to win. My view is I'm not too sure either side, because you've got the links and the providers and the data and the feeds and the APIs on this side, and you've got to kind of got the nimbleness to develop on this side. So it's kind of interesting to kind of where to put your bets again. Again, I'm kind of a tourist or just observing to work out where to go. But it's really interesting at the moment. It certainly is. It's difficult to kind of bet now and say in 3 years' time you're going to be right on whichever side of that you pick. That's where we are.
Yeah. Robo-advice. Who remembers robo-advice? That was going to transform the industry. Everyone was going to lose their jobs. That didn't quite play out that way, as it happens. The end consumer still needed that human touch to say, actually, the robot's right. That is the right fund composition. And I think there's an element of this with AI. I think, yes, of course it will make a difference. Of course it will help productivity. Potentially for the mass affluent, it may create some algorithm-driven solutions. But I think people will still want that human touch for the moments that matter. And therefore, I think our advisors will still have jobs in 10, 15 years' time.
So we're talking about the difference between generations there, and I think a big theme at the moment is this, what's been dubbed the great wealth transfer, which I love. It sounds like sort of an escape thriller movie, doesn't it? Is that something you guys are having a lot of conversations with clients at the moment? Start with you, Ben.
Yeah, I'm nodding because I think there's more than one wealth transfer to consider. And I know on the panel there are going to be some great ideas in the businesses where firms are helping the immediate next generation. But reflecting on some of the conversations from the earlier panels today, fundamentally the education of people around investments in the UK needs to change at a school level, because people are coming out of school, going into university, they don't know what a mortgage is, let alone a pension. And so the country needs to address that at the national curriculum level. The big universal banks, they're having a go. They try and do education in schools. I was at Barclays for a few years and they had a great program. But there's 30,000 schools. Barclays are barely scratching the surface. So I think we need to start with better education in society. And then how can we help? So as wealth managers, absolutely we can help. There's a number of things that we look to do. Clearly, we want to involve multiple generations of families where we look after their wealth. And so it's finding interesting ways to do that that's engaging. It perhaps isn't so interesting to say, look, bring the next generation to the meeting. That might be a bit dull. So we might try and set up thought leadership sessions. And actually, I'll share one event that we did in Scotland 4 months ago now. Completely not related to wealth management, but got quite a lot of interest. I don't know if anybody saw the McLean brothers, 3 brothers who rode the Pacific. They've set world record to be the first to do it unsupported. Well, they came into our office before they set off, and we had an informal lunch. And that was brilliant. Clients were like, you're getting access to people that we wouldn't normally speak to. That's really interesting. And I opened the session saying, isn't it fun that your wealth manager is bringing you to a session that's got nothing to do with wealth management? But obviously what we're hoping on the back of that will engage that younger audience and say, and actually, by the way, we should have that follow-on chat about your pension. So I think we as wealth managers need to be creative about how we engage the next generation. But I'll let some of the panelists share some of the activity they're doing.
We at Partners Wealth Management, we've done quite a few things, actually. It's one thing we're quite passionate about, and we've been reflecting on it for quite a long time. If you think about some of our clients, for example, they might be mid-50s and they're successful execs. They've often got children coming into the adult stages, and they are really desirous that those kids are not frivolous often, because they often have worked, most of our clients are professionals rather than inherited wealth. They've worked hard for their wealth and they want to see the next generation understand the wealth and then look after it. And to that end, one of the things we've done is offer 2-day internships to clients' children. And it's been fascinating, almost overwhelming. About this time last year, we sent out an invitation to our entire client base, thinking we'd get about 30 responses. And we were hoping to fill 30 seats in London, a couple of days before Christmas, for 18 to 23-year-olds, where we offered them an insight into what finance looked like, what the city looked like, and it was 2-day. And by the end of the afternoon, my assistant comes over to me and says, I'm a bit stressed. And I said, what's wrong? She said, I've got 120 emails from clients. It was about 3 hours had passed. So then I was like, oh, okay, what do we do? But it shows that do clients want a glass of wine and to hear about markets going up and down? Sometimes. But what shows is what they really want is you to help their kids. The feedback from the kids at the end of the 2 days, we tried to bring out all our young staff rather than, I did speak to them, but mostly we got the kids out, so the people who just come into work or they've been there for a couple of years. They did sessions like, these are the different sort of ways to save. Here's budgeting for a 20-year-old. Here's how you should manage your student loan. It was so well received. I received so many emails from clients afterwards thanking me. And then I received emails from clients who didn't even send people because they didn't have anyone to send, but who said, what a fantastic initiative, what a great firm you are. Thank you for giving back. We did it for no other reason than we thought we should try and help. Everybody's asked, are we doing it again this year? So we will run it again this year. And we've already got people who didn't get on last year on the waiting list. But I think you've got to be thoughtful about what you do to engage. We've also just created a video. So myself and the former managing partner have done a sort of a conversation about what did we wish we'd known when we were 20. And we will launch that and we'll send it out to all clients and say, this isn't for you, this is for your kids. Get them to watch it.
What did you wish you knew when you're 20?
Many things. Save, not spend, maybe might have been the first one. Yeah.
I think I think first off, I mean, the educational piece is great. I've done some of the Personal Finance Society education champion stuff, which is quite good. So she did kind of 3 classes back to back, and all the kids were asleep in the back row. It's quite bizarre, really. But anyway, so I think that's really important, the education. But you've also got to get the money out of the grandparents' hands, and that's actually quite tough because they don't necessarily trust the kids or the grandkids. They think the kids are going to try and take the money off and put them in a home. And often the products and the advice we give are quite complex, and they don't understand it. So we come back to being plain and simple. I mean, I would kind of switch it and say, I think either as an industry we need to, and I say industry, I mean third-party providers, need to be more imaginative when it comes to products and actually things that we can use. But equally, I think perhaps. Whether it's HMRC or the regulator needs to be a bit softer on some of the taxation that we have. So lifetime ISAs are great, although they're not that great now because you can't buy a house for £50,000. But the limits have changed quite significantly. So we need to be more progressive and have more wealth transfer products so that we can invest in them. Because actually, JISAs are great. I think if you've got kids, you've got a JISA, junior ISA there, sorry. And if you've got a lifetime ISA, then there's more things like that we can end up moving the funds down, because I think that's really important, because you have to buy a house or you have to retire on it, and these things need to be looked at.
And the potential challenge coming down the line in November is if a lifetime gifting cap is put into place. Are your clients worried about that sort of thing, stymieing their plans?
I think clients are worried about most things at the moment. We had an IHT seminar in the summer, and again, we were overwhelmed with people wanting to come. And again, sometimes we find people aren't that interested, but I think the landscape, the lack of certainty means people are worried about most things. I think in the end, it'll settle down, whatever the outcome of November is. I think clients, once they understand the framework within which they need to operate, and we can then help them through that, it'll settle back down. But at the moment, it's the lack of clarity, I think, that's most challenging.
I'd absolutely echo that. I think the number of things, there are things clients can do, which is excellent, and therefore advisors need to step up and really help their clients. We did a mail shot to our client base last month, which was entitled, "Are you worried about inheritance tax?" And we were again overwhelmed with people saying, "Do you know what? I really do. We need to do something. What can I do? Should I be waiting for November to see if they make things harder, or should we try and do things now?" It's a concern. It's for high net worth individuals. It's something they need to be planning for and utilising every opportunity that they can. So yes, and we wait to see what the first week of November brings.
Yeah, I don't know, it's probably just my own personal opinion. It's not me with my MD hat on, so please take it as a pinch of salt. But I think people in the UK are slightly at the brink of their kind of tolerance for taxation across every level. So I think there's a danger that if we move any further on, whether that be property tax, with stamp duty, whether that be IHT, whether that be income, national insurance, and so on and so forth, that we're kind of running out of road, and goodwill is kind of vanishing quickly. And so that creates opportunities for financial planners, because the various things we can do. But actually, I think it's at a stage now where people are kind of making life choices around work, around business structures, around family, pressures on school fees, and so on and so forth. So I think there's kind of people are making choices, life choices, based on the kind of taxation, which I'm not sure is a healthy place to be, actually.
And Ben, you mentioned before about, how do we think about the great wealth transfer? Do you just bring your children along to the IFA meeting? Is part of it that the industry has a bit of an image problem? Is shrinking. You get IFAs themselves refer to themselves as a dying breed. So how do you attract newcomers to the industry who can zhuzh it up a bit?
Yeah, you're spot on. You've got to be creative, both in the things you put on for your client base. And I mentioned, these rowers we got in the Edinburgh office. In London last summer, we did a brilliant painting event, which was an unexpected success. We invited clients to come to a painting class with an abstract artist. They loved it. And we did another one where we sponsored a photography competition. And again, this engaged one of the clients, a much younger client, who frankly hadn't been that interested in talking to us about the money. They'd inherited money. It was sat with us, but really weren't that engaged. Suddenly, we got them to come and do something they were interested about, and we could initiate that conversation in a much more enjoyable fashion, should we say. So I think there's that immediate, how do you engage the clients? And then there's the advisors themselves. How do we attract younger advisors to move into the industry? That's an ongoing challenge. We've got a business arm that we are running an academy for advisors. There are a few firms that run academies. St. James's Place is a spoken about academy. And I think they do a good job. I've actually hired people who have been through that St. James's Place Academy, and they create good advisors who have the ability to ask open questions, listen well, and they get them through their qualifications. So, and then thankfully they decide SJP is not for them and they come and work for me. So that's a win. But so we're creating our own academy as well, so that we can attract those younger advisors who hopefully will have more of a connection with those younger clients.
Yeah, one of the things we've done is we've always had interns who prove to be the most tremendous value for both sides. That relationship's fantastic. For a 19, 20-year-old, they're in their year out from university. They're learning to get up on time, put a jacket on, get out of bed, come to work. It's such a fantastic experience. And for us, we find that the first few months are normally, we're not winning so much. Normally the back six, we really are. And one of the things we've sort of really tried to do is reach a bit further out to where we're looking for those interns from. Again, we're trying to sort of see, can we bring a few more females into the industry? Can we, perhaps you need to start there. So I elected to drive 1,000,000 miles to a university and stand up in front of 600 students and go and say, actually, you could come and be one of our interns. And again, I thought perhaps that, I felt that sort of duty to reach my hand back to the younger generation and say, look, this is a profession that could suit many of you. And what was fantastic at that day was so many people came to speak to me after, I had like a 3-minute presentation, was to ask about, what actually a financial planner does. They'd no idea. Look, heaven help me, I didn't before I came into the profession. But it was fantastic to see people saying, well, what does that do? Oh, I thought I had to be a genius with maths. I said, look, I've got a languages degree. I did maths at GCSE. I don't have a maths A level. I managed. But breaking down those barriers, breaking down the misconceptions of what a financial advisor is. But I think you've sort of got to keep going almost further and further back to try and reach your hand back and bring the younger generation with you.
Well, I think, Holly, first of all, it's quite a brave thing to call us all dinosaurs, but, that's absolutely fine. It's not really work. So, but I think I agree. There's a bit of a stigma, a bit of a kind of stuffy, he sits in his corduroy jacket, but, it's a bit of a stuffy view of us. But also equally, it comes down to money, because often any client I've ever seen has always said to me, I don't think I've got enough money to be your client. And you're thinking, well, you've got £1 million. Have you got more than me? So, so exactly. So I think there's a bit of stigma. So the way we address it, I think all the stuff we talked about, schools and engagement. I also think that the advice gap's quite important, because you don't need £1 million to have advice, and neither should you. A bit of a swimming against the current for the regulation in terms of looking after small clients, I must say. But again, using AI, using kind of everything we're developing, certainly within Saltus, we are focusing on closing that advice gap as best we can. We've got a select service which focuses on those with less than 250, and the average client's got about 150,000. Still, again, it's quite high. It's not 13, it's not 50, so it's high, but we're trying to get there. And I suppose we do it through trying to provide a service that is better, actually, than our premier service. And actually our kind of NPS score, the kind of net promoter score from our clients, was 64, which is outstanding, and really something that we need to aim for to get better. So I kind of say to the team, try and have a better net promoter score and client feedback than the premier team. But it's really important, and it's not easy, actually, to turn a profit and to provide a great service for clients at that level. But that I think that's how we engage.
Well, it strikes me that one of the challenges facing the dinosaur brigade is a communications gap as well as an advice gap, because my image of a financial advisor is someone you sit down with face to face, or you might have a phone consultation with, and just sweeping generalisation, but I would say both of those things would scare the bejesus out of a Gen Z, and they might just prefer you to WhatsApp them some advice. How do we tackle that?
I'm not sure our FCA representative is going to like the use of WhatsApp, and it's an absolutely valid challenge. The communication challenge, the communication channels. Earlier on, they were talking about finfluencers, which I thought was great. Right, these financial influencers. We ought to have one in our company. I don't think we do yet, but that's something I'm going to be taking back, because, and it won't be me, by the way. As we've identified, I'm a dinosaur. So, but we do need financial representatives in the social media channels that the next generation are using. So, to help with that education, to help point them in the right direction. It might not be the medium through which you give the advice, but it raises awareness of it and points them in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. There aren't enough people, I think, on social with good social media content. So, but I think Ben's right. WhatsApp is it's not even the way youngsters communicate, is it? Probably have to be Snapchat or something else. But there is a need probably for advice to be distilled in a different manner. Conversely, we make sure that our interns in their first week when they come from university, we make them ring somebody up. It's quite a funny thing, but we ask them to ring a provider and they all go, "What, me?" You go, "Yes, you." And by the end of the first week, they're like, "Oh yeah, fine." So it just shows you've got to get through these things, but they're things they've not done before. But I think you're right on the personal finance. We will need to be ingenious about how we think about giving advice. And I'm sure there's a few smaller firms I've seen out there who've done some ingenious things where they're all quite small practices, but they've done some ingenious things, and they've almost got their face is social media rather than, Partners Wealth Management is the brand. It's a social, that's where their clients are coming from. So I think, there's a few key smaller firms doing some great work in that space.
So COVID was a massive opportunity for us in our industry. I mean, it completely changed the way that our clients see digital meetings. I mean, it was amazing, really, if we look at it now. Because before that, it was inconceivable that a client with a large amount to invest or your client would see you virtually. Almost impossible. And now you have grandmothers in their 80s who are dialing into Zoom meetings, and it's like not an issue at all. So I think that's on a massive. So our select proposition, it's all virtual, and there is no issues at all. Absolutely no issues whatsoever. So it's become part of our being now, isn't it? It's there. So I think it's that thing is a big change, and it's good for us.
Yeah, I'm nodding to absolutely agree with that last comment. I think McKinsey said that during COVID we saw 5 years of tech advancements in 5 weeks, and I can remember my own school children teaching me how to use Teams. And this shift in society, it became socially acceptable to have a video call. We all had the technology on our computers, our work computers, we just didn't use it, and suddenly there was no choice. And now it's really helping. So to address where we started the conversation, the increasing cost to serve, actually we're more productive because we can use video calls and clients don't mind. So that's helping us big time.
Excellent. Right, time to throw it out to the floor. Any questions for our panel? Don't be shy.
Hello. I just wondered to what extent you see the growth of the DIY investing market to be a risk to advice in the long term, because presumably the next generation are going to be much more comfortable doing this themselves. Is that going to have a long-term impact on you, or do you think as people's wealth grows, they'll go for advice?
So apart from constantly nicking clients of each other, there's at least 34% of the market with assets that haven't even got advice. So the market is bigger than we could probably deal with, and the number of advice firms are shrinking. So in terms of demand for our services, I have no concerns with it. In fact, I actually welcome DIY. Like I've always, if you can give yourself advice with ChatGPT or just Google it or work it out, and if it's not complicated, do it. Save yourself some money. But if you're time poor and you have money, then we can be there for you, and I think that's really important. And some of this that we talked about today is about client segmentation, and actually saying that if AI changes it and you want to be more digital and we don't need to be there, we can charge you lower fees. But if you want to come to the office and have a nice lunch and we can go out and bring your family and talk about really complicated advice, then we're going to charge you more. So I think it's about choice ultimately. And I always got to put it down to, I think I mentioned it previously, that we, you can do your own plumbing if you want to. And in fact, the other weekend I did. Luckily got away with it. But you don't have to. You can get a plumber in, but they'll charge you £300. So it's entirely up to you. And choice is good, and we shouldn't be afraid of that.
I think Ben made the point earlier as well of sometimes it's just having that reassurance of someone to hold your hand through something. And I was speaking to an advisor recently, and it may well have even been one of you three, who said they'd had a client come for a one-off session and paid whatever for it, and at the end gone, oh, that was a bit of a waste of money. That's all what I thought. But actually, it wasn't a waste of money because it reinforced that what I was doing was right. And particularly with the taxes changing about every 6 months at the moment, you want someone to hold your hand through the complicated stuff.
Thanks. Oh God, that's louder than I expected. You all spoke about engaging the, let's say, younger generation of existing clients. Do you have a way or a strategy to engage potential high earners? I think it was you, Fiona, maybe who mentioned that most of your clients are people who have worked for their money instead of inherited it. So I'm sure there's a generation of people who are, let's say, in their 30s, maybe not at the level yet where they are clients, then not having kids come in for work experience. So how are you engaging with them and getting your brand out there?
Slowly, I think, is the answer, is the truthful answer. I think, we're sort of well represented amongst people who have, sufficient wealth to seek advice. I think we're good at being really entrepreneurial. So the heritage of Partners Wealth Management was being entrepreneurial, that we were the ones who took the clients who were potentially in their 30s, who were associates in law firms and accountancy practice. They weren't the partners. The partners had already been sucked up by bigger and brighter names than us because we were a small practice. That's worked really well for us. And I think it's, for me, it's actually one of the easiest ways to do it is through the professional community. So, for example, I've got some quite young advisors who are, say, 30, and their professional networks are the people who will give them the work. And funnily enough, those people tend to gel well with people the same sort of age. So that's been fortunate for us, and we've sort of pushed out into law firms, accountancy practices, and tried to set up sort of networking. That's been super successful. And then trying to enter firms. We've done some work where we will go and do some presentations to, say, a big firm, but we've been really good about saying, no, nothing too small. What we've been good at is taking all inquiries. We do mortgages as well. That's always an easy way in. Someone might not overtly have wealth, but we could help them rebroke their mortgage. That's an easy way in, or some life insurance or something. And then we're good at being transactional and saying, no, you don't need help. You can sort of help yourself. Come back when you do. And I think if you always treat people properly, they normally they might recommend you to somebody else, mightn't they? But they'll be respectful of that. But I think it's hard. That group is hard, isn't it? The youngsters, we're sort of pushing through the clients. We've got the sort of more established people, you know, who might be, it's being a bit ageist, but might be a bit slightly later in their career. But getting into that middle ground of young professionals who are super successful, they are definitely the people we want to try and appeal to. So suggestions welcome.
I'd echo that. It's a segment we all want to go after, and whether we like it or not, the regulation burden on us is the same for every client. So the cost to serve remains quite high. So trying to come up with that, how do we serve them in an efficient way while still meeting all of those regulatory obligations and giving them a great client experience? You know, that's why you hear firms having these minimums. And how do we avoid having a minimum and still deliver that? It's a challenge we're still grappling with.
Well, I'm going to wrap up by asking, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for the industry in the coming 1 to 5 years?
I'm a firm believer in opening up the advice that we give to the smaller clients. So those below 250 at the lower end, and may that move into the younger generation, possibly, but actually it just covers more of the ground where there's opportunity there. Because I think I just think there's the advice gap is only growing, and there is a need there that I think that a business can look at and can kind of do a good job on. So for us, we're trying to use everything that we have gained from COVID and virtual connectivity and the digital enhancements and AI and everything to kind of really kind of target that ground, because it links to both the more higher net worth clients as well. But that's where I think the opportunity is. And then I think finally, from a kind of a business point of view, I think the opportunity is to kind of improve margins based on using that tech as well. So to actually make giving advice to great advice to smaller clients quite profitable as well. And I think that's kind of that is something that's not been achieved, certainly by Nutmeg anyway. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that, but certainly hasn't been achieved by various firms that have not managed to kind of grab that opportunity, which I think is huge.
I think we've got a few opportunities. I'd agree that the mass affluent opportunity absolutely is out there. I also think for firms such as ours, being that complete wealth manager, so the center of gravity for a client to help them with all their wealth needs. You know, lots of firms are good at bits of the journey, but actually to be able to be the best at all of it, or the center of gravity for them, and bring in specialists, I don't think one firm at the moment stands out, and that's where we'd like to be.
For me, it's I don't know if anyone in the room has sought financial advice in the last year, but it's quite a slow process, and that always really disappoints clients, that they turn up, they think they've done the hard yards by arriving at the meeting, and then they realise, gosh, there's a ton more things that need to happen, paperwork that needs to be found, sent off to providers. I think that with AI and improvements, that speed of receipt of advice, consumption of advice has to improve, and I think that'd be, entirely welcome from our client base.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys. We've got just over 5 minutes, and then we'll be back in here at 3:30 for the next session, which is positioning the UK to become a global digital asset hub. But in the meantime, round of applause. Thank you.